If you're so smart, then translate it. 50 engineers failed, but the shy waitress solved everything. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get into today's story. In a high-rise building that dominated the Manhattan skyline, a team of 50 engineers sat in a sleek, glass-walled conference room, their faces grim as they stared at a screen full of foreign text. They had been given a critical task: to translate a complex, multi-page technical document that could make or break a billion-dollar deal. But there was a catch. The language was not just another foreign tongue. It was a technical dialect few could understand. As the minutes ticked by, the engineers, all highly educated and experienced, struggled to even make sense of the content. The room was thick with tension, each engineer trying and failing to decode the intricate phrases. Among them was Jack Anderson, the CEO of a massive tech company, a man who had built his empire on the ability to outsmart competitors and solve the toughest problems. He watched in frustration as his team continued to falter. "Come on, we can't afford to waste any more time on this. We need to get this done now," Jack muttered, tapping his fingers impatiently on the table. His voice was calm, but his jaw was clenched, clearly showing his growing annoyance. At that moment, a young waitress named Christina Matthews, who had been working in the building's cafe for the past 6 months, overheard the conversation as she passed by. Christina was quiet and reserved, never one to draw attention to herself. She had been serving coffee to the engineers for weeks, but no one ever paid much attention to her. She was just another face in the background, another waitress in a suit and apron. However, Christina was no ordinary waitress. In her spare time, she had devoured books on linguistics and translation, and her love for languages was more than a hobby. It was her passion. As she overheard the engineer's struggle, she felt a spark of recognition. She knew the language, the very one that had them stumped. Without thinking, she stepped into the conference room, hesitated for a second, and then spoke. "Excuse me, but I think I can help with that translation." The engineers looked up in surprise, some even chuckling at the idea. "You?" Jack raised an eyebrow. "You're just a waitress. What do you know about technical translations?" Christina's heart raced, but she didn't let it show. She stood her ground, her voice steady but firm. "I'm familiar with the language. I can translate it accurately." Jack, still skeptical but desperate, nodded curtly. "Fine, go ahead. Let's see what you can do." Christina took a deep breath and approached the screen. She quickly scanned the document, her eyes moving with practiced ease over the complex technical terms. As she began to translate, the room fell silent. The engineers watched in stunned silence as she worked with surprising speed and precision. With each sentence, her translation was not only accurate but also clear, breaking down the technical jargon into simple, understandable terms. Jack's frustration melted away as he watched her work. He had never expected a waitress to possess such skill. "This is incredible," he muttered under his breath. The engineers, now realizing the depth of her knowledge, began to exchange glances. "How is she doing this so easily?" one of them whispered. Christina continued to work, her focus unwavering. As she finished the final section of the document, she looked up. "There, it's done," she said quietly. Jack stared at her, a mix of disbelief and admiration on his face. "Who are you?" he asked, unable to hide the awe in his voice. Christina smiled, but there was no arrogance in her expression, just someone who loves languages. The room remained silent for a moment, the weight of what had just happened sinking in. Jack looked at the engineers, then back at Christina, a new respect in his eyes. "I think I may have underestimated you," he said, his voice softer now. "You just saved us. We owe you more than just thanks." Christina nodded, her face flushed but proud. It was just a simple translation. But to Jack, it was much more than that. He realized, in that moment, that sometimes the most unexpected people hold the key to solving the most difficult problems. As the minutes passed, Christina Matthews felt a strange mix of pride and nervousness as the room of engineers continued to stare at her. It was clear that her quick and accurate translation had made an unexpected impact. The once dismissive CEO, Jack Anderson, had stopped pacing, his arms crossed, watching her with an intensity that almost felt like a challenge. The engineers, who had laughed at the very idea of her helping, now leaned forward, eyes wide, as if they had just seen something miraculous. Christina stood at the front of the conference room, her heart still pounding from the tension, but she kept her composure. She had always been used to working behind the scenes, never the center of attention, but today was different. Today, her knowledge had silenced the skeptics. "I guess that's it," Jack finally said, breaking the silence. His voice had softened, but there was still a hint of disbelief. "I didn't expect that from you." Christina didn't answer immediately. She wasn't looking for praise, but the respect in Jack's voice was hard to ignore. She had, after all, just done something no one else in the room could do. "It's not a big deal," she said quietly, glancing at the group of engineers who were still processing what had just happened. They had never considered a waitress could hold the key to solving their problem. Jack, who had never been the type to admit fault, felt a pang of humility he hadn't experienced in a long time. He watched Christina, her eyes still focused on the screen, scrolling back to check a few details. He couldn't help but wonder how many other talents she had that no one had bothered to uncover. "You know," Jack continued, his voice taking on a more serious tone, "we could really use someone like you on the team. Someone who thinks outside the box, someone who doesn't get bogged down by the usual constraints." Christina's head snapped up, surprised by his words. "I'm just a waitress," she said, her tone a little defensive. "I'm not qualified for anything like that." Jack's eyes narrowed slightly as if measuring her. "No, you're not just a waitress," he said slowly. "You're someone who can do what 50 engineers couldn't. You're someone who knows more than you let on." The room fell silent again as everyone digested what Jack had just said. The engineers exchanged glances, clearly impressed but unsure of what to make of it. Christina, on the other hand, couldn't help but feel a little uncomfortable. She had worked so hard to keep her personal life under wraps, to avoid the kind of attention Jack was now giving her. "I don't know what you mean," she replied, her voice hesitant. "I don't have any experience in your field." Jack was undeterred. "Experience isn't everything," he said, stepping closer to the table. "We need someone who can think critically, who can look at a problem from a different perspective. That's what you did today. You saved us." Christina felt a shift in the air as the weight of Jack's words sank in. She had always been the quiet one, the observer. She'd never dreamed of being part of something like this. But now, in this room full of highly trained engineers, she had been the one to step up. It was overwhelming, but at the same time, something inside her felt right. Jack leaned forward slightly, his voice lowering to a more personal tone. "I want to offer you something, Christina. A position on the team. You'd work with us on a more permanent basis, helping us with translation and interpretation on technical projects." Christina's eyes widened in surprise. "Wait, what?" she said, her voice shaky. I'm not qualified for that. I don't have the right background." Jack held up his hand, stopping her before she could continue. "You're more qualified than you think. You just showed me that. If you're willing to step up, I can offer you more than just a job. I can give you a future in this company, one that could change everything for you." His words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. Christina felt a flood of emotions, excitement, fear, doubt. She had always dreamed of doing something more with her life, but she never imagined it would come in the form of an offer from a billionaire CEO. She wasn't sure what to say. She had worked hard to get to this point, to prove herself despite the odds. But now, faced with the reality of what Jack was offering, she had to wonder, was she ready to take that leap? I don't know what to say," Christina stammered, her mind racing. "This is a lot to take in." Jack smiled, a look of understanding in his eyes. "Take your time," he said. "But know this, we need people who aren't afraid to challenge the status quo. People like you, who don't just follow the rules. People who make a difference." Christina felt a surge of pride, but also a sense of fear creeping in. This could change everything. But was she ready to change her life? As the meeting ended and the engineers filed out of the room, Christina lingered behind, deep in thought. Jack had made an offer that could shape her future in ways she couldn't yet comprehend. But she knew one thing for sure. This was her chance to prove to herself that she was more than just a waitress. And, for the first time in a long time, she wasn't sure what the next step would be, but she was ready to take it. I thought over Jack's offer for the next few days, the weight of the decision heavy on my mind. The world I had known for so long seemed suddenly small, insignificant even, compared to the opportunity that lay before me. Jack had said that my knowledge was more valuable than I had realized, but I wasn't sure I was ready to leave behind the quiet life I'd built for myself. What if I failed? What if I couldn't handle the pressure? My heart kept pulling me back to the safety of the cafe, the familiarity of the job that kept me grounded. But every time I thought about walking away, I couldn't ignore the spark inside me. It was the feeling of being seen, of being recognized for something more than my apron and tray. I had spent years buried under the weight of self-doubt, constantly telling myself that I wasn't enough, that I didn't belong in the world of corporate suits and billion-dollar deals. But Jack's words kept echoing in my mind. Asterisk, you saved us. Asterisk, I could never have imagined a moment where a simple waitress like me would be the one to solve a problem for a room full of engineers. And that feeling, knowing that I had done something important, felt too good to ignore. On the fourth day after the meeting, I called Jack. My hands trembled as I dialed the number he had given me, but when he answered, his voice was warm, like nothing had changed. Christina, how are you? He asked. I took a deep breath. I've thought about your offer. There was a pause on the other end. I could almost hear him holding his breath. And I'd like to give it a shot. My voice was steady, but the butterflies in my stomach were anything but. I'm in. Jack's response was instant, a burst of relief in his voice. That's great to hear. I'm looking forward to having you on the team, Christina. You won't regret this. The next day, I walked into the corporate headquarters of Anderson Capital. The building was far grander than anything I had ever seen. The glass walls gleamed under the sun, and the polished floors reflected my nervous steps. I was no longer just a waitress. I was about to step into a new world, one I had only ever dreamed of. As I made my way to Jack's office, the tension in my shoulders grew with every step. I hadn't even started yet, and already, I was questioning myself. What did I know about corporate life? About finance? About anything other than languages and translation? When I reached the entrance to Jack's office, I took another deep breath and knocked. The door opened almost immediately, and there stood Jack, looking just as polished as I remembered him from the meeting. Christina, he said with a smile, stepping aside to let me in. I'm glad you're here. I smiled back, though I was sure it didn't reach my eyes. I felt like an imposter in this sleek, modern office. But Jack's presence, his genuine warmth, helped to ease my nerves. As we sat down, Jack explained the details of the job. It was far more than just translation. He wanted me to be a part of his team, to offer fresh perspectives on various international deals and projects, particularly those involving cross-cultural negotiations and technical documents. I listened carefully, trying to take it all in, but I couldn't help but feel overwhelmed. It wasn't just the job that scared me. It was the whole world that came with it. The stakes were higher than I had ever imagined, and the thought of messing up terrified me. You don't have to be perfect, Christina, Jack said, as if reading my mind. What I need from you is honesty, curiosity, and the willingness to learn. If you can do that, you'll be an asset to this company, and I have no doubt that you'll succeed. His confidence in me made the knot in my stomach loosen a little. Jack didn't expect me to have all the answers right away. He wasn't looking for someone who had it all figured out. He just wanted someone who was willing to try. I can do that, I said, my voice firmer than I felt. I'm ready to learn. Jack smiled, standing up to shake my hand. I'm looking forward to working with you, Christina. Over the next few weeks, I dove into the work. At first, it was challenging, beyond challenging, really. The documents I had to translate were far more complicated than anything I had ever done before. The language wasn't just technical. It was dense with jargon, legal terms, and concepts I had never encountered. But I kept at it, one step at a time. Slowly, the work began to make sense. I started to see the patterns, to understand the underlying logic of it all. With Jack's support and the encouragement of my new colleagues, I began to feel like I was truly contributing. I wasn't just a waitress anymore. I was someone who could make a difference. But it wasn't just the work that kept me going. It was the sense of belonging. In this world of high-powered executives and high-stakes decisions, I felt like I finally had a place. I had earned it. I had proven, not to Jack or anyone else, but to myself, that I was more than just what I appeared to be. I was capable, and that more than anything else, was the greatest gift I could have given myself. I had been working at Anderson Capital for over 2 months now, and the transformation inside me was undeniable. What had started as a hesitant step into a new world had turned into something I hadn't expected. Every day brought new challenges, new tasks, and with each passing day, I became more confident in my abilities. Jack had been right. What he needed from me wasn't perfection. It was the willingness to learn, to think differently, and to contribute with the knowledge I had, even if it came from a completely unexpected place. I was working alongside a team of the brightest minds, yet somehow, I didn't feel out of place. They respected me, my ideas, and my unique perspective. I still couldn't quite shake the feeling that I didn't belong in this world of billion-dollar deals and high-tech innovations. But the feeling was slowly being replaced by something else, pride. I had earned my spot. I was proving to myself, and to others, that the person I had once been, someone unsure of herself and her worth, was no longer who I was. But no matter how much I had changed, no matter how much I had learned, there was one thing I couldn't escape: the quiet fear that I wasn't good enough. That fear lived in the back of my mind, gnawing at me on the days when things went wrong, when I made mistakes. I had never been one to embrace failure. It was always easier to hide, to keep my head down, and not draw attention to myself. But now I couldn't hide. Not here. Not in a world where success was expected, where the stakes were high, and every mistake was magnified. And so, I pushed through. I spent long nights working, studying, reading everything I could get my hands on. Sometimes it felt like I was drowning, but then I remembered what Jack had said to me that first day. We need people who think differently. Those words kept me grounded when everything else seemed uncertain. One afternoon, as I was leaving my office, Jack approached me. He had that look in his eyes, the one that told me something important was coming. "Christina," he began, his voice a little more serious than usual. "I need to talk to you about something." My stomach dropped. "What's wrong?" I asked, already feeling the weight of the question. Jack smiled, but it was a knowing smile, one that suggested this conversation wasn't going to be about anything bad. "You've been doing great work. I've been hearing nothing but good things about you from the team." I exhaled a breath I didn't realize I had been holding. "Thank you, Jack," I said, trying to sound as confident as I could. But his expression shifted, and his smile faded slightly. "But I think it's time you take on something more. Something bigger." My heart started to race again. "What do you mean?" I asked, unsure if I was ready for more responsibility. Jack's gaze held steady. "We have a new project coming up, something huge. A deal that could take Anderson Capital to new heights. And I want you to be a part of it. Not just as a translator, but as an active member of the team, making critical decisions." "What do you think?" I blinked, my mind racing to process his words. Me? A part of a team making critical decisions? The idea was overwhelming, but at the same time, the spark of excitement I had felt when I first joined the company flared up again. Could I really do this? Could I take that step? I'm not sure if I'm ready for that, I admitted, my voice betraying the uncertainty I felt. Jack studied me for a moment, then nodded. "I get it. It's a big step, but you've already shown you're more than capable. This isn't about your experience. It's about your ability to think critically, to see things others can't. And that's why I believe you're the right person for this project." I felt the weight of his words, and despite my doubts, something inside me began to shift. This wasn't just about my skills anymore. It was about my ability to trust myself, to step into a world I had once thought was too big for me. The fear of failure, the fear of being unqualified, all of it started to fade. "Okay," I said finally, my voice steady. "I'll do it." Jack's smile returned, this time broader than before. "That's what I like to hear. I knew you'd make the right choice." I felt a rush of adrenaline as I processed the weight of what I had just agreed to. This was my moment to prove to myself that I wasn't just a waitress, that I wasn't just the person everyone had written off. I was more than that. I had something to offer, and this project, this new challenge, was the opportunity one needed to prove it. The following weeks were a blur of meetings, strategy sessions, and long hours, but each day felt more rewarding than the last. I was contributing in ways I never thought possible, offering insights and ideas that were being taken seriously. And as the project grew, so did my confidence. I wasn't just the shy waitress anymore. I was a crucial part of a team, someone whose input mattered. One evening, as I reviewed some final reports in my office, Jack came in to check on the progress. "How are you holding up?" he asked, his voice casual but concerned. I smiled, feeling a quiet sense of pride. "Better than I thought I would," I said, finally feeling at ease in my new role. Jack chuckled, his eyes gleaming with approval. "I knew you had it in you." And just like that, something inside me clicked. I had found my place, not just in this company, but in my own life. And for the first time, I was ready to see where this new path would take me. I had barely settled into my new role when the real challenges began. The project Jack had brought me into was far from simple. It was complex, high stakes, and required not only skill but an immense amount of trust in my abilities. The team was counting on me, and I couldn't afford to let them down. It wasn't just about translating documents anymore. It was about contributing to a strategy that could change the trajectory of Anderson Capital. I sat in meetings with the executives, working alongside people who had decades of experience in the industry. They were all highly educated, sharp, and confident. And there I was, a former waitress, just a few months ago barely making ends meet, now a key player in one of the most important projects in the company. It was overwhelming. Every day, I struggled with the feeling that I didn't belong. The imposter syndrome was suffocating, making it hard to breathe sometimes. But as the days went on, I realized something crucial. I was here for a reason. Jack had seen something in me that I hadn't fully recognized in myself yet. He trusted me, and that trust was beginning to change the way I saw myself. I wasn't just the shy waitress anymore. I was someone who could contribute meaningful ideas. And I would prove it, not just to Jack, but to myself. One morning, we gathered for a major meeting with a potential investor from overseas. The room was filled with some of the most powerful people in the financial world, and the pressure was palpable. The deal was a game changer, one that could bring Anderson Capital to the forefront of a new market. But there was a problem. The investor spoke a language I wasn't fully fluent in, and his accent made it even harder to understand. I had done my homework, but nothing could have prepared me for the pressure of this moment. The team around me started speaking in hushed tones, trying to figure out the best way to handle the situation. I watched them, the whispers growing louder. They were all brilliant people, but none of them spoke the investor's language fluently. As the tension built in the room, I knew what I had to do. I stood up, my heart racing, and walked over to the table where the investor sat. "I can translate," I said quietly, but loud enough for the room to hear. For a moment, there was silence. Everyone turned to look at me, as if surprised that I had spoken up. Jack's eyes met mine, and I could see a flicker of approval there. Without waiting for anyone to respond, I took my seat beside the investor. The conversation started, and I began translating, focusing on accuracy and clarity. My hands trembled slightly, but my voice was steady. The more I translated, the more I realized that this was my moment. I was no longer just a part of the team. I was a vital part of the project's success. I could feel the room's tension ease as the investor began nodding, understanding everything I was saying. The deal was moving forward, and I was the bridge between two worlds. After the meeting, Jack pulled me aside. "You did great today," he said, his voice full of admiration. "That was exactly what we needed. You didn't just translate the words. You made it possible for this deal to happen." I smiled, but inside, I was still processing everything. A few months ago, I would have never dreamed I would be sitting in a room with so much power, making decisions that could change the course of a company. But here I was, and for the first time in a long while, I felt like I belonged. That evening, as I walked back to my apartment, I reflected on how far I had come. The girl who once served coffee to executives in a small restaurant had become an integral part of that world. But it wasn't just about the success or the recognition. It was about the journey, the personal growth. I had proven to myself that I was capable of more than I had ever believed. And that was the most powerful realization of all. I had started as the shy waitress, the one no one noticed, the one who never believed she could make a difference. But now, I was someone who not only made a difference, but also shaped the future of a company. And in that moment, I realized something else. I was just getting started. I had made it. The first few months at Anderson Capital were a blur, filled with constant learning, challenges, and victories that I never could have imagined before. It was one thing to take a chance on myself, but it was another to prove that I belonged here. And with every passing day, I did. I had found my place, not just in the company, but in the world I had always admired from the outside. However, with success came its own set of struggles, and as much as I had learned, there was still more to understand. The company had just landed a massive project, and I was tasked with being the lead translator for all international communications, a responsibility that weighed on me heavily. This was no longer just about me showing that I could handle the job. It was about ensuring that this deal, the one that could skyrocket the company's success, went smoothly. The pressure was higher than ever. Jack had become more than just a boss to me. He was a mentor, a figure I trusted to guide me through the complexities of the corporate world. Yet, there were still moments when I doubted myself. The technical language, the strategies, the endless negotiations, they were overwhelming. But I remembered what Jack had said to me when I first started, I believe in you because you think differently. Never forget that. Those words rang in my ears every time I felt like I might crack under the pressure. So I pressed on. Every morning, I would sit in my office, papers and documents spread out before me, sometimes not even knowing where to start. But slowly, I began to piece everything together. I learned how to look at problems from angles no one else could see, how to translate not just language but intentions, and how to bridge cultural gaps in the business world. The work was exhausting, but it was fulfilling in ways I hadn't expected. I knew that if I failed, it would mean more than just disappointment. It would mean letting down not only Jack, but the whole team who had placed their trust in me. A month into the project, we were in the final stages of securing a partnership with an international firm. The pressure was mounting, and with each day, the stakes grew higher. One evening, Jack called me into his office to discuss a final round of negotiations. "Christina, this is it," he said, his voice uncharacteristically serious. "This deal could change everything for Anderson Capital. We're relying on you to make sure this goes off without a hitch." I nodded, feeling the weight of his words. The language was going to be difficult, technical, and full of nuances that even I wasn't entirely familiar with. But there was no turning back now. This was my moment to prove that I could handle the responsibility that came with the position. As the meeting approached, I sat in front of my computer, reviewing the documents, making sure everything was in order. The language barrier loomed large, but I felt confident that I could navigate it. I had done it before, and I knew I could do it again. The morning of the meeting arrived, and I was more nervous than I had ever been. This time, it wasn't just about translating words. It was about translating the future. When the investors arrived, the room was filled with an air of anticipation. Everyone was looking at me now, waiting for me to lead the conversation, to bridge the gap between cultures, between countries, between two companies that were about to change the business landscape. As we began the meeting, I spoke clearly, confidently, translating each phrase with precision, making sure no meaning was lost in translation. My hands trembled slightly, but my voice remained steady. The investors seemed impressed, nodding in agreement with what I was saying, the deal moving forward with every word I spoke. The team around me was watching closely, their eyes fixed on me as I translated the discussions. This was it. There was no room for error. The meeting went on for hours, and by the end of it, I felt drained but proud. The deal was secured. Jack smiled as he shook hands with the investors. "Well done, Christina," he said quietly, his approval evident in his eyes. I could hardly believe it. I had done it. The project was a success, and I had been the one to make it happen. As the team celebrated the deal, I sat quietly in the corner, reflecting on how far I had come. The girl who once served coffee had now closed one of the most important deals in the company's history. I had proven to myself that I wasn't just a waitress. I was a key player in this world of billion-dollar deals. And that realization filled me with a sense of pride that no amount of success could ever replace. As I left the office that evening, I looked up at the skyline, feeling like I had finally earned my place among the giants of the business world. There was no going back now. I was exactly where I was meant to be. I had reached a point in my career where it felt like everything I had worked for was beginning to pay off. The success of the recent deal had brought me recognition, not just within Anderson Capital, but in the broader business world. The pressure, however, had only intensified. The more I succeeded, the higher the expectations became. It was a feeling that both motivated me and kept me on edge. Each day felt like a challenge, but it was one I had come to embrace. I had earned my place here, but I still couldn't shake the sense of urgency to prove that I truly belonged. There were days when doubt would creep in, those moments when I asked myself if I was truly capable of handling the weight of the decisions being made around me. Could I maintain this pace? Could I continue to make the right calls? The voice in the back of my mind kept telling me that it wasn't enough. That one mistake, one wrong move, could send everything crashing down. As much as I wanted to shake off that fear, it was always there, pushing me to work harder, to be better, to never stop. Jack noticed the change in me. He saw the way I was becoming more reserved, more focused. It wasn't the confidence I had when I first joined the company. It was something else, a quiet determination mixed with a bit of self-doubt. One afternoon, Jack pulled me aside for a quick chat. We were standing by the windows in his office, overlooking the city. "Christina," he began, his tone serious but kind. "I've been watching you, and I know you're pushing yourself hard. But you need to take a step back." I frowned, confused. "What do you mean?" Jack turned to face me, his gaze steady. "I see what you're doing. You're overworking yourself because you're trying to prove something, but you're not just proving it to the team. You're proving it to yourself. You've already earned your place here." His words hit me harder than I expected. I had spent so much time trying to convince everyone, including myself, that I deserved to be here. But Jack's words made me realize something important. I didn't need to prove myself anymore. I had already done that. Jack continued, "You're a key part of this team, Christina. The work you've done has been invaluable. But if you keep pushing yourself this hard, you're going to burn out. Take a break. Trust the people around you. They respect you. I respect you." I stood there for a moment, processing what he had said. The idea of stepping back, of slowing down, felt foreign to me. But as I stood there, watching the hustle of the city below, I realized Jack was right. I had done enough. It was time to let go of the constant pressure and trust in what I had already accomplished. The next few days felt like a shift. I wasn't rushing from one task to the next, constantly checking my progress, second-guessing my decisions. Instead, I found myself taking a step back, breathing easier, and allowing myself to enjoy the successes I had achieved. It was a strange feeling, not having the weight of the world on my shoulders. But it was also incredibly freeing. As the weeks passed, I found myself becoming more confident in the work I was doing. I wasn't trying to be perfect anymore. I was just doing my job, and I was doing it well. And that was enough. Then, a new opportunity arose. Jack called me into his office again, and this time, the conversation was about something entirely different. "Christina," he said, "I want you to lead a new project. It's a high-profile one, and I think you're the right person to take it on." I felt a rush of excitement, but also a flicker of fear. Another project? Another challenge? But this time, I didn't feel the need to prove myself. I knew I could do it. "I'm ready," I said with confidence, my voice steady. Jack smiled, clearly pleased with my response. "I knew you'd say that. You've got this." As I left his office, I couldn't help but smile. This was what I had been working for, not just the recognition, but the trust of the people around me. I wasn't just the shy waitress anymore. I was a leader in my own right. The following weeks were filled with planning, meetings, and strategy sessions. I took the lead, guiding the team with the same calm confidence I had found in myself. The project moved forward smoothly, and as we neared the final stages, I realized something remarkable. I wasn't just capable of handling the pressure. I was thriving under it. I had found my rhythm. This wasn't the frantic, overwhelmed version of myself that I had been when I first started at Anderson Capital. This was a confident, self-assured version of me, someone who had grown into the role and was ready to take on whatever came next. It was in that moment that I truly understood Jack's advice. Success wasn't about proving myself anymore. It was about trusting in what I had already accomplished and using that to move forward with confidence. The project was a success. We had done it. And in the end, I realized that the real victory wasn't the deal we closed or the recognition that came with it. It was the quiet, personal growth I had achieved along the way. I had come so far, and for the first time, I was proud of who I had become. The next few months felt like a blur of intense work and continuous growth. The project I had taken the lead on had not only been a success, but it had also opened new doors for me within Anderson Capital. I had become a key player in the company, no longer just someone on the sidelines, but someone whose opinions were valued, whose decisions mattered. The confidence I had gained over the past year was now firmly rooted in me, But with that confidence came a new set of challenges. I had proven my ability to handle pressure, but I also realized that my role was continuing to evolve. The responsibilities I once thought would be too much for me had become second nature. Now, the stakes were even higher. As I walked into the office that morning, I could sense something was different. There was a certain buzz in the air. People were talking more than usual, whispering about something big that was coming. When I walked into Jack's office, I saw the look on his face immediately. He was calm, but there was a fire in his eyes, a sense of urgency that I hadn't seen before. "Christina," he said, looking up from his desk, "I need you to lead a new project. This is going to be the biggest deal we've ever pursued, and I believe you're the person who can make it happen." My heart skipped a beat. Another major project? Another chance to prove myself? I couldn't believe it. "What's the project?" I asked, my voice steady, though inside, I was already preparing for the next challenge. Jack leaned back in his chair, folding his arms across his chest. "We're looking at an international merger with a rival firm. It's a massive opportunity, but the process is going to be complicated. There are legal issues, language barriers, and cultural differences we have to navigate. I need someone who can manage all of that, and you're the person I trust to do it." I felt a mixture of excitement and fear rush through me. This was the kind of opportunity one had dreamed of, a chance to lead something truly significant. But it was also intimidating. A merger of this scale would mean months of negotiations, countless meetings, and the pressure of not only making the right decisions, but also managing the complexities of international business. "I'll do it," I said without hesitation. Jack smiled, clearly pleased. "I knew you would. I'll set up the team, but this will be your project. I trust you to lead us through this." As I left his office, the weight of the responsibility settled in. This was no longer about translating technical documents or leading small projects. This was the real deal. I had to ensure that every aspect of the merger went smoothly, from the financials to the cultural integration. I gathered a team of experts, each one an ace in their field: lawyers, financial analysts, cultural consultants, and translators. It felt strange to be leading a team of such experienced professionals, but they respected me. They trusted me. They knew I had the vision to bring everything together. We spent the next few weeks going through all the details. The more I dove into the work, the more I realized just how complex everything was. There were endless meetings, countless hours spent on calls, and late nights spent going through legal documents that seemed like they were written in another language. But through it all, I never lost sight of the bigger picture. This wasn't just about closing a deal. It was about shaping the future of Anderson Capital. And the more I worked, the more I realized something. I wasn't just managing a project. I was making history. The pressure was intense, but I had learned how to manage it. Every obstacle we faced, every challenge that seemed impossible, I faced it with the confidence that I had gained over the past year. And slowly, we made progress. Negotiations advanced, legal hurdles were cleared, and the cultural integration process began to take shape. It wasn't easy, and there were moments when it felt like everything might fall apart. But those moments became fewer and fewer, as the team worked seamlessly together. We were moving towards something incredible. The day the merger was officially approved, I stood in Jack's office, staring at the papers that confirmed everything. We had done it. Anderson Capital had just merged with a rival firm, creating one of the largest financial powerhouses in the industry. The sense of accomplishment was overwhelming. I had done what I once thought was impossible. I had led the charge, and I had helped to shape the future of the company. Jack came over to congratulate me. "You did it," he said, his voice filled with pride. "This was a monumental success, Christina. You've proven yourself in ways I couldn't have imagined." I smiled, but inside, I knew that the true reward wasn't just the success of the merger. It was the realization that I had become someone I never thought I could be. A leader, a trailblazer, someone who had the confidence to take on the biggest challenges and come out on top. As I walked out of the office that day, I looked at the city skyline, feeling a quiet sense of pride. I had come so far, and for the first time in my life, I felt like I was exactly where I was meant to be. I had just led Anderson Capital through one of the biggest milestones in its history, but I wasn't feeling the exhilaration I had expected. Instead, there was a heavy silence hanging over me as I sat in my office, staring at the city skyline outside. The merger was a success. No one could deny that. We had expanded our reach, built new partnerships, and solidified our place in the financial world. Yet, something inside me felt unsettled. I had achieved more than I ever imagined, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I had crossed a line, a point of no return, where I couldn't go back to the person I had once been. The constant drive for success, the pressure to keep performing at this level, it was exhausting. I knew I couldn't keep pushing myself this way forever. Jack had warned me about burning out, but I had ignored his advice, thinking I could handle everything. Now, I was beginning to understand the weight of those words. The company was growing rapidly, and I was expected to keep up with it. I had led multiple projects, each one bigger than the last, but now I found myself wondering if I was losing touch with the person I had been when I started. The shy waitress who had dreamed of something more. Was I still that person, or had I become someone else entirely? The long nights and intense days were beginning to take their toll. I was snapping at my colleagues more than I should, becoming frustrated over the smallest things. The pressure of constantly proving myself, of always being at the top of my game, was starting to feel like too much. I had no time for anything outside of work, no time for friends, for family, for myself. The person I had become wasn't just someone who worked hard. It was someone who had forgotten how to live outside of the office. I needed a change, but I wasn't sure where to start. One evening, as I was sitting in my office, Jack walked in, his usual confident demeanor softened by something else, concern. He had been observing me, I could tell. "Christina," he began, his voice quieter than usual, "we need to talk." I looked up at him, my heart sinking. "What's going on?" I asked, bracing myself for whatever was coming. Jack leaned against my desk, his eyes scanning my face, as though trying to read me. "I've noticed you've been working nonstop. And I get it. You've been killing it on every project. But you're burning out, and I can see it. You need to take a break." I stared at him, stunned. "I'm fine," I said quickly, but the words sounded hollow even to me. Jack didn't back down. "You're not fine, Christina. I know what you're capable of, and I know how hard you've worked. But you're not doing anyone any favors if you keep running yourself into the ground." He paused for a moment, letting his words sink in. "You've done more than enough. Now, it's time to give yourself a break. Take some time off. Rest. Recharge. Let the team take over for a bit." I was silent for a long moment, the weight of his words hitting me harder than I expected. He was right. I had been pushing myself too hard, trying to prove something that didn't need proving. I had already shown that I was capable. I had already earned my place in the company. I had been afraid to stop, afraid that if I did, I might lose everything I had worked for. But I was starting to realize that by not taking care of myself, I was putting everything at risk. "Maybe you're right," I said finally, my voice small. Jack smiled, a look of relief crossing his face. "You've done more than anyone could have expected, Christina. Now, take a step back. Your health is more important than any project." His words were a wake-up call. I realized then that I couldn't keep running on empty. I had given everything to the company, but now it was time to give something to myself. The next morning, I submitted my request for time off. It was a strange feeling, giving myself permission to rest. But as the days passed, I found myself rediscovering parts of my life I had neglected for so long. I spent time with my family, took long walks in the park, and read books that had nothing to do with business. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I could breathe. When I returned to work, I was a different person. I was still the same confident leader, but I had learned the importance of balance. I wasn't just defined by my work anymore. I had rediscovered the joy of living outside of the office. I was no longer the woman who defined herself by her success. I was someone who knew how to rest, how to take care of herself, and how to find peace in the midst of chaos. Jack noticed the change in me immediately. "Welcome back," he said with a knowing smile. "How are you feeling?" "Better," I replied, a smile tugging at my lips. "I think I've learned that taking a step back is sometimes the best way to move forward." Jack's expression softened. "I'm glad to hear that. You're going to do great things, Christina. Just remember, you don't have to do it all alone." And with that, I realized that I wasn't just a key player in Anderson Capital. I was someone who had learned to thrive by finding balance in both work and life. I didn't need to prove anything anymore. I had already shown my worth. The journey was far from over, but now I knew how to navigate it without losing myself along the way. I had returned to Anderson Capital with a fresh perspective, but little did I know, another challenge was just around the corner. The time off had given me a much-needed break, and I had learned to find a better balance between my personal life and my career. I felt like I had finally regained control over my own life. But the truth was, there was more ahead that would test me in ways I hadn't imagined. The success of the merger had earned me the trust and respect of Jack and the entire company. But now I faced something that felt even more intimidating, taking on a leadership role in a brand new venture. This time, I wasn't just managing a project. I was leading a team of incredibly talented professionals, each of whom had far more experience than I did. Jack had asked me to oversee a new expansion project into European markets. The scope of it was enormous, bringing Anderson Capital's reach across borders into completely new territories required careful planning, precision, and immense dedication. The pressure was mounting again. I had to prove that I could do this, that I was capable of stepping up in a way that no one had expected. There was no room for error. I assembled my team, hand-picked experts who had years of experience in international business, finance, and strategy. They were all highly skilled, and I was keenly aware of how much I still had to learn. Yet, they didn't see me as the rookie anymore. They respected me. They trusted my judgment. And that made me realize something profound. I had earned this role. I wasn't just the waitress-turned-leader anymore. I was a leader, period. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind. Every day was filled with back-to-back meetings, constant calls with international partners, and analyzing data that seemed to grow by the hour. I felt stretched thin, but with each challenge, I found myself becoming more adept at navigating the complexities of global business. I had learned to delegate when necessary, to trust my team, and most importantly, to make decisions without doubting myself. The journey wasn't without its struggles. We encountered cultural barriers, logistical challenges, and unforeseen setbacks along the way. But rather than crumble under the weight of it all, I stepped up, facing each obstacle with determination and a sense of calm that I hadn't known I was capable of. What's more, I was seeing the fruits of our labor. The expansion was succeeding, and I was beginning to realize that I had become the person I once only dreamed of being. The person who could lead a team, face challenges head-on, and make decisions that would shape the company's future. But just as I felt like I was getting into a rhythm, the next curveball came. A major competitor, a global financial powerhouse, launched an aggressive takeover bid for one of our key partnerships. It was a move that threatened to undo everything we had worked for. Jack called an emergency meeting. The team gathered in the conference room, tension in the air. "This is a direct threat to everything we've been working on," Jack said, his tone sharp. "We need to act fast and decisively. Christina, you've handled every challenge that's come your way, but this is different. We need a strategy that can not only protect our interests, but ensure that this partnership stays in our hands." I felt the weight of his words. This was the biggest test yet, facing off against a rival who had far more resources and power. The clock was ticking, but instead of feeling overwhelmed, I felt something else, resolve. This was what I had been preparing for. "We'll handle it," I said, standing tall, my voice steady. "Let's put a plan together. We need to be proactive, not reactive." I spent the next few days in a relentless grind of strategizing, analyzing, and formulating a plan. I consulted with legal experts, financial analysts, and market strategists. Each meeting felt more intense than the last, but every step we took brought us closer to a solution. We identified weaknesses in our competitors' approach, pinpointed areas where they were vulnerable, and started to leverage our own strengths. Our established relationships with key players, our innovative business models, and our proven track record of success. The final presentation was the culmination of weeks of hard work. My team and I stood before the board of directors, outlining our strategy for preserving our partnership and outmaneuvering our competitor. The plan was bold, aggressive, and calculated, and as I spoke, I could feel the confidence in my voice growing. This wasn't just a strategy to save our company. It was a strategy that would propel us forward, solidifying our position as an industry leader. When the meeting ended, Jack stood and walked over to me. "Well done," he said, his voice filled with admiration. "You've not only led us through this challenge, but you've set us up for success in ways I couldn't have imagined. This is the kind of leadership we need." I smiled, but inside, I felt a wave of pride. I had done it again. The success of the expansion, coupled with the victory in the takeover battle, proved that I was not just capable of leading, I was thriving. The once shy waitress had now become a force to be reckoned with in the world of corporate leadership. The journey was far from over, but I no longer doubted my place. I had earned it, and I was ready for whatever came next. I had just proven myself yet again, leading the company through a high-stakes negotiation that ended in success. With every achievement, I felt a little more confident, a little more assured that I had earned my place in Anderson Capital. But no victory was ever permanent, and I was about to face a new test. A storm was brewing on the horizon, one that would challenge everything I had worked for. The company had just expanded into the European market, and with the new territory came new risks. A major economic shift was occurring overseas, and the markets were starting to show signs of volatility. As the situation began to unfold, Jack called me into his office. He looked more serious than I had ever seen him. "Christina," he began, "I need you to prepare for something. We are going to need to move fast. The market conditions are changing, and I need you to help guide the company through this transition." I listened closely, my heart pounding as the weight of his words sank in. This wasn't just about handling another successful project. This was about surviving a crisis, one that could shake the very foundation of Anderson Capital. The market crash that was on the horizon could lead to massive financial losses, and it was up to me to help minimize the damage. The first few days were a whirlwind of meetings, strategy sessions, and consultations with financial experts. I worked tirelessly, going over the company's investments, analyzing risk, and developing contingency plans. The pressure was enormous. This wasn't just about making a smart business decision. This was about ensuring the company's survival in the face of a financial storm that could wipe out everything we had worked for. I spent long hours at the office, poring over spreadsheets, talking to analysts, and trying to predict how the market would react. Every time I looked at the numbers, my heart skipped a beat. The stakes were higher than ever, and I couldn't afford to make a single misstep. I knew Jack was counting on me, but I also knew that this time, the success of the company would depend on the collective effort of every person on the team. It wasn't just my decisions that mattered. It was the team's ability to work together, to strategize and adjust to the rapidly changing situation. Over the course of the next few weeks, we developed a strategy that focused on diversifying investments, reducing exposure to high-risk markets, and focusing on the long-term stability of the company. We communicated with our international partners, keeping them informed of our plans, and built a contingency plan in case the worst-case scenario occurred. The entire team worked around the clock, determined not to let the company falter. The days felt endless, filled with anxiety and uncertainty. But despite the pressure, I felt a sense of purpose that I hadn't felt before. This wasn't just about managing projects or securing deals anymore. This was about guiding a company through a crisis, ensuring that Anderson Capital not only survived but came out stronger on the other side. Jack's trust in me had never been more important. I wasn't just his go-to leader for everyday business. Now, I was the one making the tough calls, the one leading the charge to safeguard the company's future. There were moments when I felt overwhelmed, when the weight of it all seemed too much. But then I would remember how far I had come, from the quiet waitress who never thought she'd belong in this world to the leader of a company fighting through a financial crisis. I had proven to myself that I was capable, and now, I was ready to prove it again. As the weeks went by, the market situation continued to worsen, but Anderson Capital's position was secure. The strategy we had implemented was working, and we were weathering the storm better than most of our competitors. We had managed to stay ahead of the curve, and I knew that our ability to adapt quickly had been key. But the real test came when we had to make the final call. The market crash hit harder than we had anticipated. But instead of panicking, we took immediate action. We sold off some of our more volatile investments, shifted our focus to more stable assets, and made sure that our partners and clients were supported throughout the process. It was a difficult decision, but one that ultimately ensured the company's stability. And when the dust settled, I felt a quiet sense of pride. Anderson Capital had not only survived the crisis, but emerged even stronger than before. Jack came to me after the dust had settled. "You did it," he said, a look of admiration in his eyes. "You helped us navigate through the storm. You've earned your place here more than you know." I smiled, feeling a deep sense of relief and accomplishment. The company had made it through, and I had been part of the reason why. But more than that, I had learned something valuable about myself. I had proven that I was capable of handling more than I ever thought possible. The storm had come, but we had made it through, and I was ready for whatever challenge came next. I had never been more proud of the work we had done, but I also knew the hardest part was yet to come. We had weathered the storm, outsmarted our competitors, and come through the crisis unscathed. But now, as the company stabilized, new opportunities arose, and with them, new challenges. It was no longer just about survival. It was about taking the next big step. Jack called me into his office one morning, his usual calm demeanor giving way to something more serious. "Christina," he said, "you've shown me time and time again that you're capable of handling anything. But now, we're looking at an opportunity that will require everything you've got." I could feel the weight of his words before he even explained further. The company was in a strong position, but we were now facing a chance to expand into a new sector, a market we had never ventured into before. We were looking at acquiring a tech startup that had groundbreaking innovations, but they were struggling financially. The potential was enormous, but the risks were just as high. This wasn't going to be a typical merger or expansion. It was a high-stakes gamble. "I need you to lead the acquisition," Jack said, his voice steady but filled with the gravity of the request. "You're the one who can pull this off. But this time, you'll be the face of Anderson Capital in these negotiations. You'll be working directly with the startup's founders and investors. They need to see someone who believes in the vision, someone who has the foresight to know what this acquisition could mean for the future." I took a deep breath. This was the challenge I had been waiting for, the one that would truly define my career. But with it came an intense sense of fear. Could I really handle something so big, so unpredictable? The startup was small, but their technology was revolutionary. If we succeeded in acquiring them and integrating their innovations into our operations, it would not only solidify Anderson Capital's position as a leader in the financial industry, but also set us on a path to become a dominant player in tech. But failure meant significant financial losses and potentially damaging our reputation as a company that could handle risky ventures. I couldn't afford to fail. Over the next few weeks, I immersed myself in the details of the deal. I met with the founders, listened to their pitches, and examined every financial statement, every market trend. The more I learned, the more I realized how much potential was there. These founders were brilliant, driven, and passionate about their product, but they lacked the resources and infrastructure to bring their ideas to the scale they dreamed of. That's where we came in. But I also knew that this wasn't just about technology or business. It was about vision. I had to sell them on the idea that Anderson Capital wasn't just an investor. We were a partner, a company that could help bring their dreams to life. As the negotiations drew closer, I could feel the pressure mounting. There were moments when I doubted my ability to lead this acquisition, moments when I questioned whether I was the right person for the job. The stakes were higher than anything I had faced before, and the responsibility weighed on me. But every time those doubts crept in, I thought back to the girl who had started out as a shy waitress, who had no idea she could ever be part of something this big. I thought about how far I had come, and how much I had already accomplished. I had made it this far because I believed in myself, because I had trusted my instincts and my ability to rise to the occasion. And this time would be no different. The day of the final negotiations arrived, and I found myself face to face with the startup's investors and the founders. The room was filled with tension, the weight of the decision in the air. I could feel the eyes on me, watching to see if I had what it took to close this deal. I took a deep breath and began speaking, laying out our vision for the future, showing them how we could help them realize their potential. The words came easily, my confidence growing as I spoke. The founders listened intently, nodding as I outlined the plan. As I finished, there was a brief silence in the room. Then one of the investors spoke. "You truly believe in this, don't you?" he asked, his voice skeptical but curious. "I do," I said firmly. "I believe in you, in your technology, and in the future we can build together. Anderson Capital doesn't just invest in companies. We invest in ideas, in vision. And this partnership will be the beginning of something much bigger than any of us can imagine." There was a moment of quiet as the investors conferred among themselves. My heart raced as I waited, but I knew I had done everything I could. Finally, the lead investor turned to me. "We're in," he said, a smile creeping onto his face. "We'll make this work." Relief washed over me, followed by a rush of pride. We had done it. The deal was set. The acquisition would go through, and Anderson Capital would not only expand its reach, but also revolutionize its place in the tech world. As I left the meeting, I could feel the weight lifting from my shoulders. I had succeeded. I had not only led a project that would change the company's future, but I had also proven to myself that I could handle any challenge that came my way. I was no longer just the shy waitress who had dreamed of something bigger. I was a leader, someone who had shaped the future of one of the most influential companies in the world. The deal had been finalized, and Anderson Capital was now on its way to becoming a major player in the tech world. I had proven myself yet again, not only as a capable leader, but as someone who could navigate the complexities of the business world with confidence and poise. But as the days passed and the celebrations died down, I found myself reflecting on everything that had led me to this point. It had been a long, winding road from the shy waitress I once was, someone who never believed she could be part of the corporate world, to the leader I had become today. The journey had been filled with moments of self-doubt, fear, and uncertainty, but with each challenge, I had grown stronger. I had learned to trust myself, to trust my instincts, and to believe in my ability to overcome even the toughest obstacles. But as I sat in my office one evening, looking out at the city skyline, I realized something. While I had achieved so much, I had also lost something along the way. The sense of wonder, the excitement of starting something new, of growing and learning without the weight of expectation on my shoulders. I had become so focused on proving myself, on meeting the high standards I had set for myself, that I had forgotten to enjoy the journey. The pressure to constantly succeed, to always be the one who had the answers, had taken its toll. I had lost touch with the things that once brought me joy, time with my family, my friends, and even my own sense of self. I needed to take a step back, to remember why I started this journey in the first place. It wasn't just about climbing the corporate ladder or proving myself to others. It was about finding fulfillment in my work, in my life, and in the relationships I had built along the way. I knew I couldn't continue down this path of constant hustle without losing myself. That night, I made a decision. I wasn't going to let the pressure of success define me anymore. I was going to redefine what success meant in my life. It wasn't just about the next deal or the next big project. It was about finding balance, about enjoying the small moments and the relationships that truly mattered. I started taking time for myself again, spending more time with my family, reconnecting with old friends, and even rediscovering hobbies I had neglected. It wasn't easy, and there were still moments when the weight of responsibility tried to pull me back into the grind. But I was determined to live a life that wasn't just about work. I wanted to experience everything life had to offer, without feeling like I was constantly chasing after something that was always just out of reach. As the months passed, I found that this new approach didn't make me any less capable. In fact, it made me better. I was more focused, more energized, and more present in everything I did. The work still mattered, but it no longer consumed me. I had found the balance I had been seeking all along. The company continued to grow, and so did I. I was no longer the shy waitress who had doubted her worth. I had become someone who not only led with confidence, but also knew how to live with intention. And in that balance, I had found my true success. Looking back at everything I had accomplished, I realized that the journey had never really been about proving myself to others. It had always been about proving to myself that I was capable of achieving anything I set my mind to. And in doing so, I had learned the most important lesson of all. Success is not just about what you achieve. It's about how you live, who you become, and the impact you have on the world around you. I had come so far, and I knew that the journey was far from over. But now, I was ready to take it on with a renewed sense of purpose, knowing that I didn't have to do it alone. I had built a team of incredible people, and together, we would continue to shape the future of Anderson Capital. And as for me, I had found a place where I could not only be successful, but also truly be happy. I was no longer just the waitress, the underdog. I was someone who had embraced every part of my journey, learned from it, and created a life that was mine, not defined by anyone else's expectations. I had become the person I was always meant to be, and for the first time in a long time, I felt at peace. Discover a powerful and inspiring journey in these touching stories of personal growth, resilience, and transformation. From a humble beginning as a shy waitress to becoming a key leader in a major company, This narrative showcases the triumphs and challenges faced by someone determined to prove their worth. Through moments of self-doubt, fear, and immense pressure, the protagonist rises to meet the challenges of the corporate world, learning valuable lessons along the way. These touching stories highlight the importance of believing in oneself, trusting the people around you, and finding balance between ambition and personal well-being. Each chapter is filled with profound insights on overcoming obstacles, handling high-stakes situations, and embracing leadership in unexpected circumstances. These touching stories not only offer inspiration, but also provide a relatable roadmap for anyone striving to break through barriers and achieve their dreams. Follow along as the protagonist navigates a life-changing merger, tackles difficult negotiations, and ultimately realizes the true meaning of success. These touching stories are a reminder that success is not just about accomplishments, but also about personal fulfillment and the journey of self-discovery. Whether you're looking for motivation, lessons in resilience, or simply a reminder of the power of persistence, these touching stories will resonate deeply with you.